Chapter 1. The Countdown. The ballroom shimmered like a jewel box under the glow of chandeliers, every crystal catching the light and scattering it across the polished marble floor. Music pulsed from the speakers, upbeat, festive, the kind that made even the most reluctant dancers tap a foot. Linda Cruz had already kicked off her heels twice tonight, only to slip them back on when another coworker dragged her to the dance floor. Now, flushed and laughing, she sank into a chair beside her husband, Robert, who looked as effortlessly composed as ever. Robert wasn't a man who sought attention. He didn't need to. At 36, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew his worth without broadcasting it. His tailored navy suit fit like it had been made for him, his tie loosened just enough to suggest he was enjoying himself but not sloppy. He had that calm, analytical air that made people trust him. Linda had fallen for it the first time she saw him, and 3 years into marriage, she still did. Linda brushed a strand of hair from her face and grinned at him. "You survived the dance floor without me." Robert chuckled, swirling the champagne in his glass. "Barely. I was considering filing a missing person report." She laughed, leaning closer. "You'd have to explain to the cops that your wife was abducted by a conga line." "Sounds plausible," he said, deadpan, and she laughed harder. That was Robert, dry humor delivered with surgical precision. Around them, her coworkers filled the table, chatting about resolutions and office gossip. Linda felt a warm glow in her chest. This was her life. Good job, good friends, and a husband who still made her stomach flip when he smiled. She thought about the year ending and the one about to begin, and gratitude settled over her like a soft blanket. Robert reached for his drink, and Linda's gaze lingered on his hands, strong, steady, the same hands that had fixed the leaky faucet last weekend without swearing once. She loved everything about him, even the quirks that drove her crazy, especially those, like his tendency to misplace things when his mind was 3 steps ahead of his body. The memory hit her suddenly, vivid and funny. Last Saturday, Robert had wandered the living room muttering under his breath, searching for his reading glasses. Linda had watched him for a full minute before lifting a mirror in front of his face. The glasses were perched on his head like a crown. Instead of embarrassment, Robert had burst out laughing, big, unrestrained laughter that filled the room. He'd thanked her for saving his sanity and walked off still chuckling. Linda snorted at the memory, and the sound drew curious glances from her friends. "What's funny?" asked Marcy, her teammate, leaning in with a grin. Linda waved a hand. "Oh, just Robert being Robert." Robert arched a brow. "Should I be worried?" "No," Linda said, laughing. "It's just, last weekend he spent 10 minutes looking for his glasses. They were on his head the whole time." The table erupted in laughter. Robert smiled, good-natured, and lifted his glass in mock salute. "Guilty." Linda felt the champagne fizz in her veins, loosening her tongue. And then, "Oh, this is even better. He once put his phone in the fridge." "The fridge?" I opened the door to grab milk, and there it was, sitting next to the orange juice. More laughter. Someone clapped the table. Robert chuckled, but his eyes flicked to her. Just a glance, quick and unreadable. Linda didn't notice. She was on a roll now, one memory sparking another. "And don't get me started on the time he wore mismatched shoes to the gym," she said, grinning. "One black, one gray. He didn't even notice until the trainer pointed it out." The laughter swelled, and Linda basked in it, until she saw the shift. Her friends weren't just laughing at the stories. They were laughing at Robert. He had become the punchline. Jokes piled on, playful but sharp-edged. "Man, Robert," Dave said, smirking. "You sound like a walking sitcom." Robert's smile didn't falter. He laughed along, even tossed in a self-deprecating quip. From the outside, he looked unbothered. Inside, though, a different calculus was running. Robert had grown up the youngest of 5 brothers. He knew every shade of teasing, every line between fun and disrespect. And he had one rule. If someone brought a knife, you brought a gun. Not out of anger, but principle. When the laughter finally ebbed, Robert set his glass down and turned to Dave, his tone light, almost conversational. "You're Dave, right?" Dave blinked. Yeah." Robert smiled, easy and warm. "You know, your friends here hate when you cook fish in the office microwave. They think you must have sinus damage if you can't smell how bad it is." The table froze. Dave's cheeks flushed crimson. Robert chuckled, slapping the table lightly. "Seriously, though, salmon at 2 p.m.? Old move." Linda's stomach dropped. Oh no. Robert didn't stop. He moved down the line, each jab precise, each one drawn from tidbits Linda had shared over the years. The guy who never refilled the coffee pot. The woman who hoarded pens like they were gold. The coworker who sang off-key during Zoom calls. Robert delivered each with a laugh, like he was telling the funniest stories in the world. By the time he finished, he was the only one laughing. Linda shot to her feet, face burning. "Excuse me," she muttered, and headed for the door. Behind her, Robert took a slow sip of champagne, then smiled at the stunned table. "Well," he said cheerfully, rising, "looks like my evening's over. Happy New Year, everyone." He grinned, all teeth and charm, and strolled out like a man leaving a poker table with all the chips. The ride home was a study in contrasts. Linda sat rigid in the passenger seat, mortified, replaying every second of the disaster. Robert hummed along to a classic rock song on the radio, tapping the steering wheel like nothing had happened. Finally, she burst out. "Robert, what was that?" He glanced at her, calm as ever. "What was what?" You humiliated them." He shrugged. "They started it. They were joking. At my expense," he said mildly. "I figured they'd enjoy a taste of their own medicine." Linda groaned, burying her face in her hands. "I can't believe this." Robert's voice softened. "Hey, I didn't include you, did I?" She looked up, startled. "What? I never made you the punchline," he said simply. "That's the line I don't cross." Linda stared at him, words tangling in her throat. He wasn't angry, not even a little. He was serene, and that made her feel worse, because somewhere between the champagne and the laughter, she had crossed a line without meaning to. The rest of the drive passed in silence, broken only by Robert's quiet humming. Linda stared out the window, shame curling in her chest. She'd fix this. She had to. Tomorrow, she'd make a resolution. No more gossip, no more careless jokes. Robert deserved better. He deserved everything. And as the city lights blurred past, Linda realized something else. She was fiercely proud of him. Proud of the way he stayed in control. Proud of the man she married. Even if tonight she wanted to crawl under a rock. Chapter 2. Resolutions and Regrets. The first morning of the new year crept in quietly, sunlight filtering through the sheer curtains of the crew's bedroom. Linda lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the previous night like a bad sitcom marathon. Every laugh, every punchline, every frozen face at the table. It all looped in merciless detail. Robert's steady breathing beside her was maddeningly calm. He slept like a man who had no regrets, one arm draped across his chest, the other resting on the pillow. Linda envied that serenity. She felt like a storm in a teacup, contained, but swirling violently inside. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, and padded to the kitchen. The house was still, the kind of quiet that made every sound exaggerated, the click of the coffee maker, the hum of the refrigerator. Linda wrapped her hands around a mug and stared out the window at the pale winter sky. What was I thinking? The question had haunted her since the car ride home. She hadn't meant to humiliate him. It had started as a harmless anecdote, a little laughter to lighten the mood. But then one memory led to another, and before she knew it, she'd turned her husband into the evening's entertainment. And Robert had retaliated with surgical precision. She could still see Dave's crimson face, Marcy's stunned silence. Linda groaned softly and pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window. She wasn't just embarrassed, she was ashamed. Robert deserved better than that. He was her best friend, her partner, the man who made her laugh until her stomach hurt. And she'd made him the punchline. The sound of footsteps pulled her from her thoughts. Robert appeared in the doorway, hair tousled, wearing a gray t-shirt and sweatpants. He looked infuriatingly good for someone who'd stayed up past midnight. "Morning," he said, voice warm and unhurried. Linda forced a smile. "Morning." He crossed to the counter, kissed her cheek, and reached for a mug. "Coffee smells good." She watched him pour, her stomach tightening. He was so normal. No tension, no simmering anger. Just Robert being Robert. It made her guilt feel heavier. "Sleep okay?" she asked, trying for casual. "Like a rock," he said, leaning against the counter. "You?" Linda hesitated. "Not really." Robert studied her for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Still thinking about last night." Her cheeks burned. "You could say that." He shrugged, taking a sip of coffee. "Don't lose sleep over it." Linda blinked. "You're not mad." Robert's expression softened. "Linda, if I got mad every time someone told a joke about me, I'd have ulcers by now. But she broke off, words tangling. "I shouldn't have done that." He set his mug down and reached for her hand. His touch was warm, grounding. "You didn't mean any harm. I know that." Linda stared at him, throat tight. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even hurt. Not in the way she feared. But that didn't erase what she felt. She squeezed his hand, then pulled away gently. "I'm making a resolution," she said, voice firm. "No more gossip, and no more using people I love as a punchline." Robert's brows lifted, amused. "That's oddly specific." "I mean it," Linda said. "You deserve better." He smiled, that slow, devastating smile that had undone her from the start. "I appreciate that. But for the record, I'm not fragile." "I know," she said softly. "That's not the point." Robert studied her for a beat, then nodded. "Fair enough." The conversation could have ended there, but Linda felt the need to fill the silence. "You were impressive last night." His lips twitched. "Impressive. The way you handled them," she said. "You didn't lose your cool. You didn't get petty. You just took control." Robert chuckled. "Old habits. From your brothers?" "From life," he said simply. "Every interaction's a duel. If they bring love, you return it. If they bring a knife," he shrugged, "you bring a gun." Linda shook her head, half laughing, half exasperated. You're impossible. And yet, he said, leaning in to kiss her temple. You married me. She smiled despite herself, the knot in her chest loosening just a little. The rest of the day unfolded in quiet domestic rhythm. Robert headed to the gym, his ritual 3 times a week without fail, while Linda tackled laundry and tried not to dwell on the looming awkwardness at work. Her co-workers would have questions. They'd tease, and she'd have to own it. When Robert returned, damp-haired and smelling faintly of soap, he found her curled on the couch with a notebook. Planning world domination? He asked, dropping beside her. Resolutions, she said, holding up the page. Real ones. He peered at her neat list. Be kinder. Listen more. No gossip. No punchlines. At the bottom, in bold, appreciate Robert daily. His brows rose. That last one's my favorite. Linda rolled her eyes, but her smile was genuine. Don't get cocky. Robert stretched an arm along the back of the couch, his fingers brushing her shoulder. You know I appreciate you too, right? She met his gaze, and for a moment, the air shifted lighter, warmer. I do, she said softly. He grinned. Good, because I've got plans this year. Linda tilted her head. Plans? Big ones, he said, cryptic. But you'll see. Before she could press, he kissed her. Quick, teasing, and rose to grab his laptop. Linda watched him, curiosity sparking. Robert wasn't a man who made vague statements without reason. Whatever he was planning, it wasn't small. And just like that, the seed was planted. A new year, a new resolution, and a mystery she hadn't expected. Chapter 3. Sparks and Side Eyes. Linda's first day back at work after the new year felt like walking into a sitcom where everyone knew the punchline but her. The office buzzed with post-holiday chatter, resolutions, gym memberships, and leftover cookie guilt. But as soon as she stepped through the glass doors, she felt the shift. Heads turned, smiles widened, and then came the first volley. Well, if it isn't Mrs. Roastmaster, Marcy called from her desk, grinning like a cat with cream. Linda froze mid-step. Excuse me? Marcy leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Word on the street is your husband annihilated Dave at the party. Linda's stomach dropped. Oh God. Dave popped up from behind his monitor, cheeks still faintly pink. Annihilated? Try nuked from orbit. Linda groaned, covering her face. I'm so sorry. Dave waved a hand, half laughing. Honestly, it was impressive. Guy's got timing. Marcy smirked. And intel. How did he know about the fish thing? Linda muttered. I might have mentioned it once. Once. Marcy snorted. He had a dossier. Linda wanted to sink into the carpet. Instead, she forced a laugh and made a beeline for her desk, vowing silently to stick to her resolution. No gossip. No punchlines. Ever again. Across town, Robert sat in his office, the hum of servers and faint click of keyboards a familiar soundtrack. He was reviewing a security audit when the email pinged. A subject line that made his brows lift. Special project discussion, confidential. He opened it, scanning quickly. A meeting invite from his manager, Karen, scheduled for Friday. The note was vague, but the tone wasn't. Looking forward to discussing an opportunity aligned with your expertise and leadership potential. Robert leaned back, fingers steepled. Opportunity, leadership. Those weren't words tossed around lightly in his world. He'd suspected something was brewing. Karen had been unusually attentive lately, looping him into high-level calls, asking for his input on strategy. But this felt different. He closed the email and stared at the city skyline beyond his window. Executive role? Maybe. He wasn't the type to chase titles, but he understood what they meant. Responsibility, influence, the chance to shape things instead of just fixing them. And if he was honest, the idea stirred something in him. Not ego. Purpose. His phone buzzed, breaking the thought. A text from Linda. Survived the first wave of teasing. Barely. You're infamous. Robert smiled, thumbs flying. Infamy suits me. Dinner on me tonight? Her reply came fast. Only if you promise not to roast the waiter. Scout's honor, he sent back, chuckling. That evening, Linda found him in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, chopping vegetables with the precision of a surgeon. Music played softly. Classic rock, his go-to, and the scent of garlic filled the air. You're cooking? She asked, surprised. Robert glanced up, eyes warm. Figured I'd start the year strong. Linda smiled, slipping off her coat. You're full of surprises lately. He grinned. You have no idea. She tilted her head. Cryptic much. Maybe, he said, sliding onions into the pan. Keeps life interesting. Linda leaned against the counter, watching him work. There was something about Robert in his element. Focused, calm, utterly unflappable. That made her heart squeeze. Last night's guilt still lingered, but moments like this reminded her why she'd fallen for him. He was steady in a world that spun too fast. You know, she said lightly, Marcy thinks you have a dossier on my coworkers. Robert smirked. Dossier is a strong word. Her exact phrase was, nuked from orbit. He chuckled, stirring the pan. Sounds accurate. Linda shook her head, laughing despite herself. You're impossible. And yet, he said, echoing his line from yesterday. You married me. She rolled her eyes, but her smile was genuine. Lucky me. Later, after dinner and dishes, they curled on the couch, Robert's arm draped around her shoulders. Linda felt the tension of the day melt away, replaced by something softer, warmer. She thought about her resolution about being better, not just for him but for herself. Less gossip, more grace, more gratitude. Robert kissed her temple, his voice low. You okay? She nodded. Better now. Good, he said, and for a moment silence stretched, comfortable, easy. Then he added, almost casually, big week ahead. Linda glanced up. Big how? He smiled faintly. You'll see. She narrowed her eyes. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Maybe, he said, and kissed her again, leaving her both exasperated and intrigued. Chapter 4. The invitation. By Thursday, Linda had almost convinced herself the party fiasco was ancient history. Almost. The teasing at work had tapered off, replaced by the usual marketing chatter about campaigns and client pitches. She was halfway through drafting a social media calendar when Marcy leaned over the partition with a grin that spelled trouble. Weekend getaway, Marcy announced like it was breaking news. Team building retreat. Lakeview Lodge. You in? Linda blinked. Wait, what? Marcy waved a glossy flyer. Management booked it. 2 nights, all expenses paid. Workshops, bonfires, trust falls, the whole cheesy package. Linda groaned. Trust falls? Seriously? Come on, Marcy coaxed. It'll be fun. Plus, rumor has it there's a spa. Linda hesitated. The idea of spending a weekend with the same people who'd witnessed her husband's verbal demolition derby wasn't exactly appealing. But skipping it would look worse. She sighed. Fine. I'm in. Marcy grinned. That's the spirit. Pack something cute. Linda forced a smile, already dreading the inevitable fish jokes. That evening, Robert was sprawled on the couch, laptop balanced on his knees, when Linda walked in with the flyer. He glanced up, brows lifting. Lakeview Lodge, he read aloud. Sounds rustic. Team building retreat, Linda said, dropping her bag. This weekend. Robert closed his laptop, expression calm. You going? I don't have much choice, she said, flopping beside him. It's mandatory fun, he chuckled. Those 2 words don't belong together. Tell me about it, Linda muttered. I was hoping to spend the weekend hiding under a blanket. Robert studied her for a moment, then smiled faintly. You should go. Linda blinked. You think? Sure, he said. Get some fresh air. Bond with your coworkers. Maybe convince Dave you're not married to a supervillain. Linda groaned. Don't remind me. Robert's grin widened. For what it's worth, I think you handled it fine. She shot him a look. I humiliated you. He shrugged. You embarrassed yourself more than me. Linda smacked his arm, laughing despite herself. You're impossible. And yet, he said, echoing his favorite line. You married me. She rolled her eyes, but her smile lingered. You're awfully zen about this. Perspective, he said simply. Life's too short to sweat the small stuff. Linda leaned against him, letting his calm seep into her bones. You always make it sound so easy. It is, he said, kissing her temple. Mostly. Friday morning brought its own surprise. Robert's calendar pinged with the meeting invite he'd been waiting for. Special project discussion, Karen's office, 10 a.m. He straightened his tie, checked his reflection, and headed down the hall with the quiet confidence that had become his trademark. Karen greeted him with a smile that didn't waste time on small talk. Robert, thanks for coming. Have a seat. He did, noting the folder on her desk labeled Strategic Security Initiative. His pulse ticked up a notch. Karen leaned forward. You've been on our radar for a while. Your work on the breach containment last quarter? Outstanding. And your audit recommendations, frankly, some of the best I've seen. Robert inclined his head. Appreciate that. We're restructuring the security division, Karen continued. Expanding scope, tightening protocols. We need someone to lead it. Someone with vision and steadiness under pressure. Robert listened, expression neutral, though inside, gears were turning fast. Leadership. Vision. This was it, the opportunity hinted at for months. Karen smiled. We think that someone is you. Robert didn't flinch, didn't grin, didn't betray the flicker of adrenaline in his veins. He simply nodded. I'm interested. Good, Karen said, sliding the folder toward him. Review this over the weekend. We'll talk next week. Robert left the office with the folder tucked under his arm and a thought lodged firmly in his mind. Big plans, indeed. That night, Linda was knee-deep in packing chaos when Robert walked in, folder in hand. She glanced up from a pile of sweaters. What's that? She asked. Homework, he said lightly, setting it on the counter. Linda eyed him. Work homework. Something like that. She narrowed her eyes. You're being cryptic again. Robert smiled, leaning against the doorway. You'll know soon enough. Linda huffed, tossing a scarf into her bag. You're enjoying this. Maybe, he said and crossed to kiss her cheek. Drive safe tomorrow. You sure you'll be okay? She asked. 2 days without me? Robert grinned. I'll try to survive. Linda laughed, shaking her head. Don't burn the house down. No promises, he said and winked. Later, when Linda was asleep, Robert sat at the kitchen table, the folder open before him. Charts, projections, organizational maps, all pointing to one thing, a role that would change everything. He traced a finger over the title page, Director of Security Operations. He wasn't a man given to grand declarations, but as he closed the folder and stared out at the quiet street, one thought settled like bedrock. This year is going to be different. Chapter 5. The Getaway Gamble. Lakeview Lodge looked like something out of a glossy travel magazine. Pine trees dusted with snow, a frozen lake shimmering under the pale winter sun, and cabins that promised rustic charm with just enough modern comfort to keep city dwellers from panicking. Linda stepped off the shuttle, tugging her coat tighter against the chill, and tried to summon enthusiasm. Mandatory fun, she reminded herself. Smile. Breathe. Pretend you're thrilled about Trust Falls. Marcy bounded up beside her, practically vibrating with excitement. Isn't this gorgeous? I'm already picturing the Instagram posts. Linda managed to smile. It's scenic. Scenic. Marcy snorted. This is paradise compared to fluorescent lights and client calls. Linda couldn't argue with that. The air was crisp, the sky a flawless blue, and for a moment, she let herself enjoy it. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Maybe she could survive 2 days without reliving the New Year's Eve roast. Then Dave appeared, lugging a duffel bag and wearing a grin that made Linda's stomach tighten. Hey Linda, he said, falling into step beside her. Tell Robert I've switched to chicken. No more fish in the microwave. Linda groaned. Dave. He laughed, good-natured, and Linda relaxed a fraction. Maybe the teasing had lost its sting. Maybe. The first workshop was exactly what Linda expected. Icebreakers, group exercises, and a facilitator who spoke in motivational quotes. Linda plastered on her best professional smile and played along, even when Marcy whispered snarky commentary that made her choke back laughter. By lunchtime, the tension had eased. People were laughing, swapping stories, and Linda found herself enjoying the camaraderie, until someone brought up resolutions. So, Linda, Marcy said, eyes twinkling, any big goals for the year? Linda hesitated, then decided honesty was safest. Be kinder, listen more, and no gossip. Marcy raised a brow. No gossip? That's ambitious. Linda smiled wryly. I figured it was time. Dave grinned. Does that include no roasting your husband? Linda flushed. Definitely. The table laughed, but it was lighter this time, almost affectionate. Linda exhaled, tension melting. Maybe she could turn this around. Maybe she could prove she wasn't the woman who weaponized anecdotes after champagne. Back home, Robert was having a very different kind of day. His living room had transformed into a war room. Laptop open, notes spread across the coffee table, the Strategic Security Initiative folder front and center. He'd spent the morning dissecting projections, identifying vulnerabilities, and sketching out a framework that could tighten the company's defenses without strangling innovation. It was the kind of challenge he thrived on, complex, high stakes, requiring both precision and creativity. And as he worked, a quiet certainty settled over him. He could do this. Not just the technical side, but the leadership piece. Guiding a team, shaping strategy, making decisions that mattered. His phone buzzed. A text from Linda. Survived Trust Falls. Barely. Send reinforcements. Robert chuckled, thumbs flying. You've got this. Spa after? Already booked? She replied, and he smiled, picturing her wrapped in a robe, sipping tea, the stress melting away. She deserved that. She deserved everything. That evening, Linda sat by the lodge's massive stone fireplace, nursing a mug of cocoa and listening to the crackle of logs. The day had been long but surprisingly tolerable, no major awkwardness, no lingering tension. She was almost relaxed when Marcy plopped down beside her with a mischievous grin. So, Marcy said, lowering her voice, your husband, he's something. Linda blinked. Something? The way he handled Dave at the party? Marcy shook her head, impressed. Savage, but classy. Linda laughed softly. Classy savage. That's a new one. I mean it, Marcy said. Most guys would have sulked or snapped. He turned it into a masterclass. Linda felt a swell of pride, unexpected and fierce. That's Robert, she said simply. Marcy studied her. You two are solid, huh? Linda smiled, warmth blooming in her chest. Rock solid. And in that moment, she realized something. The party hadn't cracked their foundation. If anything, it had reminded her of what made Robert extraordinary. Not just his wit, but his steadiness, his refusal to let ego dictate his actions. He was her anchor in a world that loved to spin. Back in Houston, Robert closed his laptop and leaned back, rubbing his eyes. The framework was taking shape, clear, actionable, ambitious without being reckless. He felt that quiet hum of satisfaction, the kind that came from solving a puzzle no one else had cracked. He glanced at the clock. Late. He should sleep. But instead, he reached for his phone and typed a message. Miss you. Hope you're having fun. Linda's reply came minutes later. Miss you too. Spa was heaven. Bonfire now. Wish you were here. Robert smiled, imagining her under a starlit sky, laughter mingling with the crackle of flames. He wished he was there too. But for now, he had his own fire to tend, the kind that could change everything. Chapter 6. Dinner Diplomacy. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, tucked between Robert's usual flood of security reports and vendor updates. A formal dinner, hosted by the CEO and senior leadership, scheduled for Saturday night at the Crescent Hotel downtown. Dress code, black tie, purpose, strategic vision and leadership alignment. Robert read it twice, then leaned back in his chair, lips curving faintly. This wasn't just dinner. This was a stage, a test wrapped in linen napkins and crystal stemware. He'd been in enough high-stakes rooms to recognize the pattern. They wanted to see him outside the firewall, in a setting where charm mattered as much as competence. He accepted the invite without hesitation, then texted Linda, big dinner Saturday. CEO execs, you're coming with me. Her reply was instant. Wait, what? Like, fancy? Black tie, he sent back. There was a pause. Then, Robert Cruz, are you trying to kill me? He chuckled, imagining her wide-eyed panic. You'll be fine. You're stunning in anything. Flattery won't save you. She shot back, but he could almost hear the laugh behind it. Saturday arrived with the kind of chaos Linda hadn't experienced since their wedding day. Her closet looked like a crime scene. Dresses strewn across the bed, shoes lined up like suspects in a lineup. She stood in the middle, clutching a sequined gown like it might whisper the answer. Robert appeared in the doorway, tuxedo jacket slung over one arm, looking maddeningly composed. Need backup? Linda whirled on him. Do I own anything that says, strategic vision? He grinned. You own plenty that says, stunning. She glared, though her lips twitched. Not helpful. Robert crossed the room, plucked a deep emerald dress from the pile, and held it up. This one. Linda eyed it. You didn't even hesitate. Because it's perfect, he said simply. Trust me. She sighed, surrendering. Fine. But if I look like a Christmas ornament, you'll look like the best gift under the tree, he said, deadpan, and she laughed despite herself. By the time they arrived at the Crescent, Linda had transformed from frazzled to flawless. Hair swept into a sleek twist, emerald silk skimming her curves, heels that made her feel like she could conquer the world. Robert, in his black tux, looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread. Together, they were a study in understated elegance. The ballroom was a glittering expanse of chandeliers and polished silver, the kind of place where conversations hummed beneath the clink of crystal. Robert guided Linda through the crowd with quiet confidence, greeting Karen with a firm handshake and the CEO with a smile that was warm but measured. Linda watched him work the room, pride swelling in her chest. He wasn't flashy, wasn't loud, just steady, composed, radiating competence. When the CEO asked about last quarter's breach containment, Robert explained with clarity and calm, weaving technical precision into language that even the finance chief could follow. Linda caught the subtle nods, the impressed glances. He was nailing it. She sipped her champagne, letting the hum of conversation wash over her, until a voice cut through, teasing and familiar. So, Robert, one exec said with a grin, any good stories from New Year's? I hear you're quite the comedian. Linda froze, glass halfway to her lips. Oh no. Robert's smile didn't falter. Comedian's a stretch, he said lightly. I just believe in equal opportunity humor. The table chuckled, and Linda exhaled, tension easing. He'd sidestepped the trap with grace, turning potential embarrassment into charm. No roasting, no defensiveness, just that calm, unflappable Robert magic. As the evening unfolded, Linda found herself relaxing, even laughing at the occasional joke about resolutions and gym memberships. When dessert arrived, a decadent chocolate soufflé, Robert leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. You're incredible, he murmured. Linda blinked. Me? You, he said, eyes steady. You make this look easy. She smiled, heart flipping. You're the one making waves. Maybe, he said, lips curving. But I like having you in my corner. Linda squeezed his hand under the table, a silent promise, always. Later, as they stepped into the cool night air, Linda let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Well, she said, slipping her arm through his. That was intense. Robert smiled. You were perfect. She laughed softly. You were more than perfect. You were, what's the word Marcy used? Savage. But classy. He chuckled. I'll take that. They walked toward the car, city lights glittering like stars scattered across asphalt. Linda glanced at him, curiosity sparking. So, what happens now? Robert's smile was slow, deliberate. Now, we wait. For what? For the call, he said simply, and opened the car door for her. Linda slid inside, heart thudding. The call. The promotion. The future. It was all closer than she'd imagined. And suddenly, the new year felt like a door swinging wide, ready to change everything. Chapter 7. Secrets and Surprises. Sunday morning dawned crisp and clear, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors of the crew's kitchen. Linda stood at the counter, hair still tousled from sleep, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. The memory of last night shimmered in her mind like a polished gem. The chandeliers, the laughter, Robert's calm authority as he navigated a room full of power players. She'd watched him own that space without arrogance, without pretense, just quiet confidence. And it had done something to her heart, something warm, something fierce. Robert appeared in the doorway, freshly showered, wearing jeans and a navy sweater that made his eyes look impossibly blue. He kissed her cheek, then reached for his mug. "Morning," he said, voice easy. Linda smiled. "Morning. Sleep okay?" "Like a rock," he said, taking a sip. "You?" "Eventually," she admitted. "I kept replaying last night." Robert's brows lifted. "In a good way, I hope." Linda laughed softly. "In a very good way. You were incredible." He shrugged, though his lips curved. "Just dinner." "Dinner with the CEO," she countered. "And you made it look effortless." Robert leaned against the counter, studying her. "You were pretty amazing yourself." Linda rolled her eyes. "I was a bundle of nerves. And still flawless," he said simply and kissed her temple. She smiled, warmth blooming in her chest. For a moment silence stretched, comfortable, easy. Then curiosity nudged her. "So," she said, tilting her head, "what happens now?" Robert set his mug down, expression thoughtful. "Now? We wait." "For what?" He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "For the call." Linda blinked. "The call?" Robert's gaze held hers, steady and calm. "Karen offered me a role." Linda's breath caught. "A role?" "Director of Security Operations," he said, voice even. "It's not official yet, but it's close." Linda stared at him, words tangling. "Director? That wasn't just a promotion, it was a leap." "Robert, that's huge." He nodded, almost casual, though she saw the flicker of excitement in his eyes. "It is." Linda set her mug down, heart thudding. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I wanted to be sure," he said gently. "And I didn't want to distract you before your retreat." Linda laughed, shaky and incredulous. "Distract me? This is... God, Robert, this is amazing." He smiled, that slow, devastating smile that had undone her from the start. "Glad you think so." Linda crossed the space between them and wrapped her arms around his neck, hugging him tight. "I'm so proud of you." His arms came around her, strong and steady. "Couldn't have done it without you." She pulled back, eyes shining. "Me? I didn't do anything." "You did everything," he said softly. "You make it all worth doing." Linda felt her throat tighten, emotion swelling like a tide. She kissed him, slow, lingering, full of everything words couldn't hold. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his, smiling through the blur. "So," she whispered. "Director Cruz, huh?" He chuckled. "Has a nice ring to it." Linda laughed, giddy and breathless. "You're buying me dinner when this is official." "Dinner? Champagne. The works," he promised. The rest of the day unfolded in a haze of quiet joy. They lingered over breakfast, teased each other about titles, and spent the afternoon curled on the couch, watching old movies and stealing kisses during the slow parts. For Linda, the weight of last week, the guilt, the awkwardness, felt like a distant shadow. This was their new chapter, bright and wide open. But beneath the warmth, a flicker of reality stirred. A bigger role meant bigger demands, longer hours, more pressure. Linda pushed the thought aside for now, choosing instead to savor the moment, the calm before the tide shifted. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, Robert sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, notes spread like a map of possibilities. Linda watched him from the doorway, heart swelling with pride and something else, anticipation. Maybe, change was coming. She could feel it in the air, humming like a wire pulled taut. Robert glanced up, catching her gaze. "You okay?" Linda smiled. "Better than okay." He held her eyes for a beat, then smiled back, the kind of smile that promised everything and asked for nothing. And in that quiet exchange, Linda knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Chapter 8. Secrets and Surprises. Monday morning arrived with the kind of quiet that felt deceptive, like the calm before a storm. Linda stood in front of the bathroom mirror, smoothing her hair, her mind still buzzing from yesterday's revelation. Director of Security Operations. It sounded like something out of a spy thriller, and Robert had said it so casually, like he was announcing they were out of milk. She smiled at her reflection, pride blooming in her chest. He deserved this, every bit of it. But beneath the pride, a flicker of unease stirred. Bigger role meant bigger hours, more pressure, less time. She pushed the thought aside, choosing instead to savor the glow of possibility. Robert appeared in the doorway, tie knotted, jacket draped over one arm. He looked like a man ready to conquer the world, and maybe he was. "Morning," he said, voice warm. Linda turned, smiling. "Morning, Director." He chuckled. Not official yet. Semantics, she teased, stepping close to straighten his tie. You're practically running the place already. Robert grinned, leaning down to kiss her. You're biased. Damn right, she said, and kissed him again, lingering just long enough to make him smile before they headed out the door. At work, Linda's day unfolded in a blur of campaign briefs and client calls, but her mind kept drifting back to Robert. She pictured him in meetings, calm and commanding, shaping strategies that would ripple across the company. The thought made her chest swell, and her stomach tighten. Change was coming. She could feel it humming in the air like static before lightning. By mid-afternoon, Marcy popped her head over the partition, eyes bright. So, Spill, how was the fancy dinner? Linda blinked. Dinner? With the CEO? Marcy said, grinning. Don't play coy. Word travels. Linda laughed softly. It was amazing. Marcy waggled her brows. Did Robert charm the room? Linda smiled, pride warming her voice. He owned it. Marcy whistled. Look at you married to a power player. Linda laughed, but the words lingered, echoing in her mind. Married to a power player. It sounded glamorous, but she knew the reality. Late nights, endless calls, pressure that didn't stop at the office door. Could they handle it? Could she? She shook the thought away and dove back into her work, determined not to borrow trouble. Across town, Robert was in a conference room, the Strategic Security Initiative folder open before him, Karen at the head of the table. The discussion was intense, budget allocations, risk assessments, timelines, but Robert thrived on it. He spoke with clarity, listened with precision, and when the CEO asked about his vision for the division, he laid it out without hesitation. Streamlined protocols, proactive threat modeling, a culture of vigilance without fear. The room was silent for a beat, then Karen smiled. That's exactly what we need. Robert nodded, calm on the surface, though inside, adrenaline hummed like a live wire. This wasn't just a pitch. It was a promise, and he intended to keep it. That evening, Linda walked into the house to find Robert in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, chopping vegetables with the same precision he brought to security audits. Music played softly, classic rock, his ritual, and the scent of garlic filled the air. You're cooking again? She asked, surprised. Robert glanced up, eyes warm. Figured we could celebrate. Linda smiled, slipping off her coat. Celebrate what? He grinned. Life. The fact that you survived trust falls. She laughed, shaking her head. Barely. Robert chuckled, sliding onions into the pan. Dinner first, then champagne. Linda tilted her head. Champagne. Top shelf, he said and winked. They ate by candlelight, laughter mingling with the clink of silverware. And for a while, the world felt simple. Just two people, good food, and the quiet hum of love. But when the plates were cleared and the champagne poured, Robert grew serious. There's something else, he said, voice low. Linda set her glass down, heart ticking faster. Something else. Robert met her gaze, steady and calm. If this role becomes official, and it will, it's going to change things. Linda swallowed. Change how? Longer hours, he said honestly. More travel. More responsibility. Linda nodded slowly, the flicker of unease she'd buried earlier rising like smoke. Okay. Robert reached for her hand, his grip warm, grounding. I need to know you're with me. Linda stared at him, emotion swelling like a tide. Robert, she said softly, I've been with you since the day I met you. That's not changing. His eyes softened, and for a moment, the weight of ambition and uncertainty melted, leaving only them. Two hearts, steady and sure. He kissed her then, slow and deep, sealing a promise that words could never hold. Later, as they curled on the couch, champagne forgotten, Linda rested her head on his shoulder, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Change was coming big, relentless, unstoppable. But so was something else, the quiet certainty that whatever storms rose, they'd weather them together. And for tonight, that was enough. Chapter 9. The test. The first week of January had barely settled into routine when Robert's phone buzzed with a message that made his pulse tick up. Urgent. Possible breach simulation. Need you in the war room. He was halfway through reviewing a vendor compliance report when the alert came. Robert closed the file, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the elevator with the calm precision of a man who thrived under pressure. This wasn't unusual, security drills were part of the job, but the timing was telling. Karen had hinted that leadership was watching him closely. If this was a test, it wasn't just about protocols. It was about poise. The war room was a hive of controlled chaos, screens glowing with cascading data, analysts hunched over keyboards, voices low but urgent. Robert stepped in, scanning the situation with quick, practiced eyes. A simulated breach had triggered multiple alerts across the network, mimicking a sophisticated attack. The goal: contain, analyze, and neutralize without disrupting critical systems. Karen spotted him and crossed the room, her expression taut but steady. Glad you're here. We need a lead. Robert nodded once. Status. Simulation shows lateral movement across 3 nodes, she said, gesturing to the screens. We've isolated two. Thirds still active. Robert absorbed the data in seconds, his mind mapping the threat like a chessboard. Lock down the compromised nodes. Segment traffic. I want packet captures on the third full trace. Karen nodded, signaling the team. Robert moved to the console, fingers flying across the keyboard, issuing commands with crisp efficiency. He didn't bark orders. He didn't panic. He orchestrated calm, deliberate, like a conductor guiding a symphony of firewalls and intrusion detection systems. Minutes stretched into an hour, tension humming like a live wire. When the final alert cleared and the network stabilized, the room exhaled as one. Karen turned to Robert, eyes sharp with something that looked like respect. Flawless, she said simply. Robert allowed himself a small nod. Team did good work. Karen smiled faintly. You did better. While Robert was extinguishing digital fires, Linda was navigating a different kind of chaos, her inbox. The retreat had barely ended before deadlines came crashing in, and she spent the morning juggling client calls and campaign revisions. But even in the whirlwind, her thoughts kept drifting to Robert. She pictured him in some high-tech command center, calm and unflappable, turning crisis into control. The image made her chest swell, and her stomach knot. She knew what this meant. The promotion wasn't just coming. It was inevitable. And with it, the tidal wave of responsibility. Could they handle it? Could she? Linda shook the thought away and focused on the spreadsheet glowing on her screen. One thing at a time. By late afternoon, Robert was back in his office, the adrenaline ebbing, replaced by a quiet hum of satisfaction. The drill had been brutal, but he'd aced it, and he knew Karen would report that up the chain. He leaned back, rubbing his eyes, when his phone buzzed again. A text from Linda. How's your day? Robert smiled, thumbs flying. Eventful. Tell you tonight. That sounds ominous, she replied, and he chuckled, imagining her arched brow. Not ominous, just big. That evening, Linda walked into the house to find Robert at the kitchen island, sleeves rolled up, laptop open beside a cutting board. He looked up, eyes warm, and smiled. Hey, he said. Dinner's in progress. Linda slipped off her coat, curiosity sparking. Eventful, huh? Robert closed the laptop, wiped his hands, and crossed to kiss her. Simulation drill. High stakes. And? She asked, searching his face. And we nailed it, he said simply. Karen was impressed. Linda smiled, pride blooming like sunlight. Of course she was. Robert studied her for a moment, then grinned. You're not even surprised. Not even a little, she said, and kissed him. Quick, teasing, full of quiet joy. Later, over plates of pasta and glasses of wine, Robert told her about the drill, the alerts, the containment, the pressure. Linda listened, rapt, marveling at the calm in his voice. He spoke of firewalls and packet captures like they were puzzle pieces, and she realized something. This wasn't just a job to him. It was a calling. He didn't chase titles for ego. He chased challenges for purpose. When he finished, Linda reached across the table and took his hand. You were born for this, she said softly. Robert's eyes held hers, steady and sure. Maybe, he said, but I was born for us first. Linda felt her throat tighten, emotion swelling like a tide. She squeezed his hand, a silent promise. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Later that night, as they curled on the couch, Robert's phone buzzed with an email notification. He glanced at the screen, lips curving faintly. Linda caught the look. What? She asked. He smiled, slow and deliberate. Karen wants to meet tomorrow. Final discussion. Linda's breath caught. Final. Robert nodded. It's happening. Linda stared at him, heart thudding, and for a moment, the world tilted bright, dizzy, full of possibility. Change was no longer coming. It was here. Chapter 10. The big reveal. The email came at 9:07 a.m., crisp and unambiguous. Subject, appointment confirmation body. Robert, congratulations. Effective immediately, you are appointed Director of Security Operations. Please join us at 3 p.m. for the formal announcement. Robert read it twice, then leaned back in his chair, letting the words settle like a weight and a gift all at once. It was official. No more waiting, no more speculation. The door had swung open, and he'd stepped through. He allowed himself a small smile, controlled, measured, but inside, adrenaline hummed like a live wire. He thought of Linda, of the promise he'd made over champagne. Dinner, celebration, the works. Tonight, he'd make good on that. Linda was halfway through a client call when her phone buzzed with a text from Robert. It's official. Her heart leapt. She typed back fast. Director Cruz? Director Cruz, he confirmed, followed by a winking emoji that made her laugh out loud. She muted the call for a split second, pressed a hand to her chest, and whispered, yes, before diving back into marketing jargon like nothing had happened. But inside, fireworks were going off. Pride, joy, and, if she was honest, a flicker of nerves. This was big. Bigger than anything they'd faced before. Could they handle it? Could she? She shoved the thought aside and texted him again. Celebration tonight. Don't argue. Wouldn't dream of it, he replied. By the time Linda got home, the house smelled like heaven, garlic, rosemary, and something rich simmering on the stove. Robert was at the kitchen island, sleeves rolled up, looking like a man who could command a boardroom and a sauté pan with equal ease. "You cooked?" she asked, dropping her bag. He grinned. "Promised you dinner, didn't I?" Linda crossed the room and kissed him, slow and lingering, tasting triumph and something sweeter. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. Robert's arms came around her, strong and steady. "Couldn't have done it without you." She pulled back, eyes shining. "You did this, Robert. You earned it." He smiled, that quiet, devastating smile that had undone her from the start. "We earned it." Dinner was a feast, perfectly seared steak, roasted vegetables, champagne chilling in a silver bucket like a promise. They ate by candlelight, laughter mingling with the clink of crystal. And for a while, the world felt simple. 2 people, 1 table, and a future bright enough to blind. But beneath the glow, reality stirred. Linda knew what this meant. Late nights, endless calls, pressure that didn't stop at the office door. She pushed the thought aside, choosing instead to savor the moment. Tonight was for joy, not worry. When the plates were cleared and the champagne poured, Robert raised his glass. "To us," he said simply. Linda clinked her glass against his, emotion swelling like a tide. "To us." They drank, and for a moment silence stretched, comfortable, easy. Then Linda laughed softly. "So, Director Cruz, what's next?" Robert's smile was slow, deliberate. "Next, we build something that lasts." Linda tilted her head. "Big words, big plans," he said, eyes steady. "But none of it matters if we don't keep this," he gestured between them. "Solid." Linda felt her throat tighten, warmth blooming in her chest. "We will," she said softly. "Always." Robert kissed her then, slow and deep, sealing a promise that words could never hold. Later, as they curled on the couch, champagne forgotten, Linda rested her head on his shoulder, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Change was here, big, relentless, unstoppable. But so was something else, the quiet certainty that whatever storms rose, they'd weather them together. And for tonight, that was enough. Chapter 11. A weekend to remember. The promotion announcement had barely settled into reality when Robert decided they needed a reset. A pause before the whirlwind of new responsibilities swept them away. So, on Friday evening, he dropped the surprise like a perfectly timed plot twist. "Pack a bag," he said, leaning against the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, eyes glinting with mischief. Linda looked up from her laptop, blinking. "Pack a bag. For the weekend," Robert said. "We're getting out of here." Linda closed the laptop slowly, suspicion and curiosity tangling. "Out of here where?" "Somewhere quiet," he said, pushing off the doorframe. "Just us. No emails, no deadlines, no breach simulations." Linda laughed, incredulous. "You planned this?" "Of course," he said, deadpan. "You think I'd let my first weekend as director be spent doing laundry?" She grinned, warmth blooming in her chest. "You're impossible." "And yet," he said, echoing his favorite line, "you married me." 2 hours later, they were on the road, city lights fading in the rearview as pine trees rose like sentinels along the highway. Robert drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on Linda's knee, his thumb tracing lazy circles that sent sparks skittering up her spine. "Where are we going?" she asked, watching the dark ribbon of road unwind. "You'll see," he said, lips curving. Linda shook her head, laughing softly. "You and your secrets. Adds to the charm," he said and winked. When they pulled up to the cabin, Linda's breath caught. It was straight out of a winter postcard. Stone chimney, wraparound porch, and a view of the lake that shimmered under a pale moon. Inside, the fire crackled in a massive stone hearth, throwing golden light across polished wood floors. "Robert," she whispered, turning in a slow circle. "This is incredible." He smiled, setting their bags down. "Thought you'd like it." "Like it?" she laughed, crossing the room to kiss him. "I love it." The evening unfolded like something scripted by fate. They cooked together, Robert searing steaks with the same precision he brought to security audits, Linda whipping up a salad while teasing him about his executive-level plating. They ate by the fire, laughter mingling with the crackle of logs, and when the plates were cleared, Robert pulled her into a slow dance to a classic rock ballad humming from his phone. Linda melted against him, her cheek resting on his shoulder, the world narrowing to the steady beat of his heart. For a moment everything else, the promotion, the pressure, the looming changes, faded into the glow of firelight and the warmth of his arms. "You know," she murmured, "you're setting a dangerous precedent." Robert chuckled. "How so?" "Cabins, firelight, gourmet dinners," she teased. "You're raising the bar." He smiled, lips brushing her hair. "Good. I plan to keep it high." Later, wrapped in blankets on the porch, they watched the stars scatter across a velvet sky. Linda sipped wine, her head resting against Robert's shoulder, and felt something settle deep inside. A quiet certainty that no promotion, no pressure, no storm could shake what they had. "Tell me something," she said softly. "Why now?" Robert glanced at her. Why the getaway? She nodded. He smiled faintly. Because life's about to get loud. And I wanted one weekend where it's just us. Linda felt her throat tighten, emotion swelling like a tide. She turned, kissed him slow and lingering, and whispered against his lips, "Thank you." His arms came around her, strong and sure. Always. They stayed up late, talking about everything and nothing. Childhood stories, dreams for the future, the ridiculousness of trust falls. And when sleep finally claimed them, it was in a tangle of blankets and warmth, the fire burning low, the stars keeping watch. Chapter 12. First day, new world. Monday morning arrived like a drum roll. Steady, insistent, impossible to ignore. Robert stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie with the precision of a man preparing for battle. The navy suit was sharp, the shoes polished to a mirror shine, but it wasn't the clothes that carried weight. It was the title, Director of Security Operations. He glanced at Linda's reflection behind him. She sat on the edge of the bed, coffee mug in hand, watching him with a smile that was equal parts pride and something softer, something that made his chest tighten. "You look." She paused, searching for the word. "Dangerously competent." Robert chuckled, smoothing the tie. "I'll take that." Linda set her mug down and crossed the room, straightening his lapel with gentle fingers. "You ready?" He met her gaze, calm and steady. "Always." She smiled, though her throat tightened. "Go make them regret every second they didn't promote you sooner." Robert grinned, kissed her slow and lingering, then grabbed his briefcase. "Dinner tonight?" "Absolutely," she said. "Champagne's waiting." The drive to headquarters felt different. Same streets, same skyline, but everything sharper, brighter, humming with possibility. Robert parked, stepped out, and walked through the glass doors like a man stepping onto a stage. Heads turned. Greetings came, warm, congratulatory, tinged with curiosity. He returned them all with that quiet confidence that had become his signature. Karen met him outside the executive suite, smile crisp and approving. "Ready for the big leagues?" Robert smiled faintly. "Born ready." She laughed, ushering him inside. The office was bigger, the view wider, but Robert barely registered the aesthetics. His focus was on the folder waiting on his desk, a roadmap of responsibilities that could make or break the company's security posture. He sat, opened the folder, and let the weight of it settle. This wasn't just a job. It was a promise, and he intended to keep it. Back home, Linda was navigating her own battlefield, emails, campaign briefs, and a calendar that looked like a game of Tetris played by a sadist. But even in the chaos, her thoughts kept drifting to Robert. She pictured him in that corner office, calm and commanding, shaping strategies that would ripple across the company. The image made her chest swell, and her stomach knot. She knew what this meant. Longer hours, more pressure, less time. Could they handle it? Could she? Linda shook the thought away and focused on the spreadsheet glowing on her screen. One thing at a time. By late afternoon, Robert had already fielded 3 high-level calls, 2 urgent emails, and 1 meeting that felt like a chess match played at lightning speed. He thrived on it, the complexity, the stakes, the hum of responsibility. But beneath the adrenaline, a flicker of reality stirred. This was only day 1. When the clock hit 6, he closed his laptop, grabbed his coat, and headed for the elevator. He could have stayed, there was always more to do, but he'd made a promise. And Robert Cruz kept his promises. Linda was lighting candles when the door opened. Robert stepped in, looking like a man who'd wrestled giants and won. She crossed the room, kissed him hard, and whispered, "Welcome home, Director." He smiled, weary but warm. Good to be home. Dinner was simple: pasta, salad, champagne, but it felt like a feast. They ate by candlelight, laughter mingling with the clink of crystal. And for a while, the world narrowed to 2 people and 1 table. But when the plates were cleared and the champagne poured, reality crept in like a shadow. "So," Linda said softly, "how was it?" Robert leaned back, exhaling. "Big, fast, intense. And?" she pressed. He smiled faintly. "And I loved it." Linda laughed, pride blooming like sunlight. "Of course you did." Robert studied her for a moment, then reached across the table, his hand warm against hers. "I need you with me on this." Linda squeezed his hand, emotion swelling like a tide. "Robert," she said softly, "I've been with you since day 1. That's not changing." His eyes softened, and for a moment, the weight of ambition and uncertainty melted, leaving only them. 2 hearts, steady and sure. He kissed her then, slow and deep, sealing a promise that words could never hold. Later, as they curled on the couch, champagne forgotten, Linda rested her head on his shoulder, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Change was here, big, relentless, unstoppable. But so was something else, the quiet certainty that whatever storms rose, they'd weather them together. And for tonight, that was enough. Chapter 13. Full circle, the year had a way of looping back on itself, like a story that knew how to stick the landing. 12 months after the night that started it all, the laughter, the roast, the ride home humming with tension. Robert and Linda found themselves standing in the same hotel ballroom, under the same glittering chandeliers, waiting for the countdown to midnight. Linda smoothed the skirt of her sapphire dress, her fingers brushing the delicate fabric as she scanned the room. It was déjà vu with a twist. The music pulsed, the champagne flowed, but everything felt different. She was different. They were different. Robert appeared at her side, tuxedo crisp, smile easy, radiating the kind of confidence that came from a year of victories and lessons learned. Director of Security Operations suited him, not just the title but the weight, the responsibility, the quiet authority. He wore it like he wore that tux, effortlessly. "You okay?" he asked, his voice warm against the hum of conversation. Linda smiled, looping her arm through his. "Better than okay." He studied her for a beat, then grinned. "You're not planning to roast me again, are you?" Linda laughed, shaking her head. "Never again. Learned my lesson." "Good," he said deadpan, "because I've got a list ready if you do." She swatted his arm, laughing harder. "You're impossible." "And yet," he said, echoing the line that had become their refrain, "you married me." As the night unfolded, Linda found herself marveling at the shift. Last year, she'd been the woman who turned her husband into a punchline without meaning to. This year, she was the woman who'd spent 12 months proving, to herself and to him, that love wasn't about perfection. It was about grace, about laughter that healed instead of cut, about choosing each other, every day even when life got loud. And life had gotten loud. Robert's promotion had brought late nights, urgent calls, and pressure that could have cracked their foundation. But it hadn't, because they'd built something stronger. Rituals that anchored them, conversations that cleared the fog, weekends that reminded them why they started this story in the first place. Linda glanced at Robert as he chatted with one of her coworkers, Dave of all people, who now greeted him with genuine warmth instead of wary amusement. Robert laughed at something Dave said, easy and unguarded, and Linda felt pride swell like a tide. He wasn't just her husband. He was her best friend, her anchor, her home. When the band struck up the countdown, 10, 9, 8, the room buzzed with anticipation. Linda turned to Robert, heart thudding like it had the first time she saw him across a crowded bar years ago. "New Year's resolution?" she asked, voice low. Robert smiled, eyes steady. "Same as last year." Linda tilted her head. "Which is?" He leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "Love you better." Her throat tightened, emotion blooming like fireworks. "You already do." "Then I'll keep doing it," he said simply, and kissed her as the room erupted in cheers and confetti. Later, as they stepped out into the cool night air, Linda slipped her hand into his, their fingers interlacing like they were made for it. The city glittered around them, alive with promise, but Linda barely noticed. Her world was here warm, steady, humming with laughter. "You know," she said softly, "last year I thought I'd ruined everything." Robert glanced at her, brows lifting. "You didn't." "I know that now," she said, smiling. "But back then," he squeezed her hand, his voice calm and sure. "We're not that fragile." Linda laughed softly. "No, we're not." They walked toward the car, the night wrapping around them like a velvet ribbon, and Linda felt the truth settle deep. Life would keep throwing curveballs, promotions, pressure, moments that tested their edges. But they'd keep catching them, together. And as Robert opened the door for her, grinning like a man who knew exactly what mattered, Linda thought of the promise she'd made a year ago. No gossip, no careless jokes, no turning love into a punchline. She'd kept it. And in return, life had handed her something better. A story that wasn't perfect, but was theirs. Fiercely, beautifully theirs.